All right, folks, we're going to get started with our first speaker. So our first speaker is Betsy Barton from the Kinder Foundation, one of our sponsors for today. So we're very appreciative of her and the foundation's support of ATDS. And I will switch over to the slides. Let's see how clean I can do this. Let's see. Okay, we stop presenting this one. We start presenting that one. That's your name. Presenter view. All right. So let's take it away, Betsy.
Hi, let's see if I know how to advance here. So I'm Betsy Barton. I am with both Infiniscape and Kinder, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. But I'm really excited to be here. This is maybe my fourth or fifth ATDS, something like that, and it's my favorite meeting every year because it's like a really great convergence of like I miss the culture of astronomy, people who care about data and the truth. I mean, not that there aren't people out there in other places, but also like people who love data and and I'll get into it a little bit, but I think that the skill set is the same that I used in astronomy and data science. So it's a good convergence. All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit. So my topic today is modern manipulation. I've been obsessed with social media for maybe the last 5 years, so I'm very worried about what it's causing. And that's the main thing I want to talk about, but I want to make sure you have a sense of who I am a little bit before that so that you can use me as a resource if you need one. So I'll talk about who I am, scale and algorithms, and what I think we can do about it. And then I'd love if there's some time to get some discussion going on what other people think, because I'm definitely in a bubble in terms of thinking about this problem. All right, so this is me in brief. I was an astronomer until 2011. So I got a PhD in extragalactic, did some postdocs, and then I was on the faculty at UC Irvine and left right after getting tenure in 2011, which is a weird thing to do. And then they brought me back to the Aura board for like 3 years. That just ended. And that was very like cathartic, let's say, to see, although it was a different view than I got when I was a professor. So I left and went to a hedge fund in 2011, Renaissance Technologies. It's very academic style hedge fund, kind of a niche thing, but it was like a very easy transition in terms of like not being corporate America at all. And the harder transition was in 2019 when I left there and spent a year working, leading a data science team at Walmart, which was quite eye-opening. And then after that, I left and started my own company, Infiniscape. And Infiniscape is going through some changes right now. I have these two slides stuck in here. They're close to what I had in my last talk. That's just kind of like my thoughts on data science versus science. And it's more like a lead in for discussion if people are curious. I guess I would just highlight the like what do I think are the strengths of the two things and what do I think are the weaknesses of the two things. Like there's things like data science is just a bigger field in essence. Like it's just a larger world, right? Like there's all kinds of different companies that need data science. And like when I was in academia, I felt like I never had a choice. Like at most I had maybe two jobs offered to me and it was never like I could pick one or the other. I had to just go where that was. Whereas data science is just a big world, right? But that's kind of like my negative too. If I look at the negatives of both of these fields, and I'm happy to like personally answer any questions you want. That's why that's why I'm here, is ask me whatever you want. But I think a negative of data science is like in academia, department is a department. Not exactly, but there's variations, but the variation from company to company is bigger, right? There's places you can go where you're just like, this is horrible. And there's places where you can go that are just wonderful and you're surrounded by people you like. And it's very hard to tell from the beginning, like from when you're interviewing someplace, what it's like. So I feel like for me, that was a positive in essence, but it's also scarier, right? There's just not the same pathway through it. All right, so what have I been working on lately? I just want to talk about this a little bit. So my company started in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. And we ended up building a social media app ultimately, and which is a weird thing to do. And I certainly freely admit that. So Kinder app exists on the App Store. It's a like a full service social media app. It has a news feed with a very simple algorithm, communities that are interest based, and it's like a nice looking app. It's based on the idea that people could like the social media isn't inherently a place where people are mean necessarily. So people make a pledge, no misinformation, you're going to hear each other out, things like that. And so we're trying to see whether we can change the tenor of social media to be something that's more supportive and positive, but not toxically positive, not like naively positive, but positive, like the kind of conversation you want to have with your friends in real life, that kind of thing. It turns out not to be an easy thing to do. We had a lot of problems and we've had a lot of problems and we've had to change form relatively recently. So it was originally built for my for-profit company Infiniscape, and we spent a lot of time thinking about different ways to monetize it that aren't ads, because I really do think the ad model is very close to the heart of the problem with social media. Is there a way to make the window bigger here? I'm just gonna try to do that. I think, yeah, if my eyes were younger, I think that's okay. That's better. All right, because I keep looking away. I can hear it. Sorry about that. Okay, so we looked at all the different economic models, and there are some ones that people use that I think aren't as bad, like maybe the people who run communities on the app can pay for that service, and that exists. But it just there's various reasons, and I'm happy to get into it, but that it doesn't work, right? So we just concluded that none of the models for economics were in any way like good for people. So the app works well. It's if you were on it 2 years ago or something, try it again. It works much better now. But it doesn't work as though we spent $1 billion on it, right? So that's a hard problem that we faced. People don't realize that these algorithms that, are the heart of the problem and are addicting are also like the thing that keeps them going to social media, right? And so they show up to an app that doesn't have that, and it feels not as enticing, right? That's just a problem we're going to have. So we've done some things to prove we can create authentic communities on the app, but it's not easy. It requires a constant influx of effort right now. So what we did at the end, like just a couple weeks ago, Infiniscape donated the app to a nonprofit, the Kinder Foundation, that we created for this purpose, in the hopes that we will be able to experiment maybe at a lower level than we've been experimenting, and find ways to get this to work. Because there are a lot of people out there who say they want a better solution to social media than the large companies that exist now, but there's just a lot of ways to do it that don't work, clearly. So right now we're trying to figure out how to get the right people on the app. And I think that the key factors here are they have to have this first adopter, early adopter mentality, like with the patients with an app that isn't as good as something that people spend hundreds of millions of dollars on. And we have that's probably been our worst thing thus far, that we have had trouble recruiting people who really understand what that means. And then complete buy-in that online connection is good, but that existing big apps are causing a lot of harm. And the problem here is there's people who don't like social media who just don't use social media, right? And then they don't want to use Kinder either. And then there's people who like social media already and don't like the difference between Kinder and this. So we have to sort of make our own market here, and that's been very difficult. And then and then the people that we need, there are some communities that don't really have big places to talk online right now, and one of them is the artist community. So we're looking for those niches, right? Where there's people who have good ways to talk to each other, but don't love Facebook or Instagram and Etsy doesn't really have community, for example. So that's what we're working on now, but we're sort of slowing down. Okay, so that's me, that's what I'm doing. And what I want to talk about is closely related to the Kinder app, which is what I'm calling modern manipulation, how scale and attention optimizing algorithms are leading to outcomes, in my opinion, that we almost can't believe. And I definitely put most of the blame, I'll try to elaborate a little bit, but I put most of the blame on these kinds of algorithms. for the particularly strange time that we find ourselves. And I have to say, like, I tried to come up with a way to give this talk that wasn't too overtly political, and I probably failed. So, I do understand that there are different viewpoints that are valid and that mine isn't the only one. And so I'm going to try to handle that as carefully as I can. But the big point I want to make is people who understand data science and algorithms, technical, like just I'm calling them technical people, we have a unique understanding of how these things work and what they can do. And I think like if you sort of exist in the technical community all the time, maybe it's not as obvious that you understand things about this that other people don't understand about it. So I think it's very, very important that we communicate these things to people regularly and in a way that is not condescending, that talks to them directly and that explains, like, in my opinion, you are being manipulated by these algorithms. And the only way I know how to fight that is to help people understand at a gut level what's happening. So that's my basic point in a nutshell. All right, so the shockers of 2025. This is the part I don't even know how to get into. Like, I've personally been freaked out about this, what's actually happening. I don't even know how bad the budget problems are right now. Since I left the Aura board, I don't get information every day. So that's one reason I'm here, to find out. But I would say we're seeing things that shock me. And I think other people and most of my friends have been freaking out. I'll just leave it at that. So, all right. So polarization. This, I found this chart from the Pew Research Center, and I have to say, like, I think it's worse than I even thought it was. And what I'm talking about is this trend. Is this a laser pointer?
Yeah.
Middle button. This trend right here, that people understand that and have increasingly understood that we need to worry about climate change and that we're seeing direct effects from it, but only one set of people understands that. And these are that's the set of people that see news from one source and not from other sources, right? We're extremely polarized and we're not getting, I have more, this is like a direct illustration of that also from the Pew Research Center. We're not getting our news from the same places. And I think this has always been true to some extent, but this is extremely true right now. So this is just like, percent who say they regularly get news from each source. This is Democrats and Republicans. And no worries. It's extremely different, right? So, and especially there's one I didn't even realize it was extreme as this. Do you want to? Okay, thanks. So we're getting our news from different sources, and these, the news also uses algorithms, but social media apps are the ones that use very efficient algorithms to only show you what you want to see. And so here's just people getting their news from social media apps, and this is just the last 5 years, because some of these really weren't even commonly used before 5 years ago, so you can't track them all that long. But people are increasingly getting their news sources from social media, which is literally just showing them things that they know they're interested in, right? And so it's just very efficiently showing people what they want to see. Here's another, just a like percentage of people who are on the app who are getting their news from that app, and like this TikTok thing is the one that kind of surprises me. And I will say, like, I guess what I would say is, in my own case, even, I have to remind myself, like, this thing is only showing me what I already think is true to a very great degree. So, okay, so here's what I tried to think about this in a way that was based on the data. And I was a little surprised to find out, like, for example, my perception is people are way more prone to conspiracy theories right now than they have been in the past. And the data I could find on this, which wasn't comprehensive, suggested that that's not really the case, right? That people have always believed in conspiracy theories and niche things, and I'm sure I do as well in certain things. And the existence of this kind of misinformation, the existence of manipulation, like people have been snake oil salesmen, right? Those things are not new. The willingness of people to believe what they want to believe and reject evidence, again, not new. very human, very common, like, science is the thing that we developed that overcame that, right? And so here's what I blame on algorithms and scale. It's just the incredible ease and efficiency with which people do this. And I'll tell you, like having, run ads on Facebook and having, met people who do this for a living, there's a playbook, right? And people, you just literally come in, write down some potential messages, test them on Facebook, for example, or whatever is your favorite, medium, see what really garners a lot of attention and outrage from people, and then double down, triple down, go tenfold with that. And that's what's happened, right? These niche things that people are freaking out about in different corners of society. It's because people tested a bunch of things, found the ones that gained traction, and doubled down, tripled down on those, right? So that's just a playbook. It's not even that difficult. It doesn't even require that much money, right? It just requires organization and knowledge of what these things, and these apps are engraved invitations to do this. So, there've always been gullible people, but they can band together, they can be found by the same organizations, and they can be pointed in the same direction. So the manipulation can be organized, systematic, and nation or worldwide. And then because only a very small number of social media apps are really succeeding, the controls of these things, and don't kid yourself, like the people who run these apps can turn knobs and control what you're seeing, right? I mean, I guess we all know that. The controls are resting in the hands of very few people, right? And then I think AI is just going to keep making this worse, right? So my own Facebook feed, if if you're not sure specifically what I'm talking about, my own Facebook feed, when I really started, like Facebook, Facebook is the first one I use. I'd never grown any affection for Instagram or TikTok particularly, although I have lots of people working with me who do use TikTok primarily or Instagram. But my own Facebook feed, it's full of people expressing outrage about current politics in ways that align with what I already think, and very specifically in niche ways, even that align with what I think. Like Ozempic, my worst fears, and I thought for a long time about whether I should get specific about this, but decided against it because sometimes these things do happen to people, but just fears of things happening to my children that are always going to catch my attention. And it's not that I can't have any awareness of this, but when it's hyper focused and I see like 10 articles a day about, kids getting kidnapped or something like that, like that's not in line with reality, right? It's not the thing that I need to be spending my time worried about. And then a few things align with my interests and very little now about like I joined Facebook to see what the kids of my friends from high school look like, right? And I don't see that anymore. So and I will say in fairness, when I became aware of this worst fears issue, I stopped showing interest and it helped. And the people like the folks that I know who like TikTok, they explicitly do that. They're like, I stopped interacting with this particular kind of content. And after some time scale, which varies by app, it stopped showing me it as much, right? But that's like a really bad way to control what people are seeing. So, all right. So algorithms, I think we all get it. What about scale? Why am I picking on that? I think scale, I never raised venture capital funding, but I dabbled in it, trying to do it for a little while. And it's extremely efficiently only going for the things that they think will scale, right? For starting companies, not necessarily inside a company already. You can kind of build a niche product, but so the big investment always follows the potential to scale because that's where you make money, right? You build something that can be replicated for $0 and then you get it replicated and that's when you make money. But it's really shut out things that you can't scale. And there's things like service industry businesses that you can still start and get funding for. But most of the time, any ideas that aren't going to scale don't get traction. They don't get any funding. Nobody is allowed to work on them for long. I mean, this is overgeneralization, but it's becoming truer and truer and truer all the time. And so it ends up with, the products and ideas that can get this kind of attention are the only things that survive. The whole thing is just becoming very efficient and too much power goes to too few people. So how much does it matter? Here's another one that I hear that just terrifies me. Like more than a third really of the market capitalization of the stocks in the United States are this, right? Are digital companies, are a very small number of companies. this NVIDIA, so this plot, so this is the S&P growth in the last, what, 5 years? And this is NVIDIA because of AI, but it's all the same, right? It's these algorithmic development and the understanding that if you can build an algorithm, you can control, many things. So, all right. So as data scientists and scientists, why are we special? We understand things, I think, about algorithms and how they manipulate that I really do think most people don't understand. And like the one that comes to mind perhaps the most strongly is like if you build a popular social media app, you don't have to build an algorithm that preys on people's worst fears. You just build an algorithm that says show people more of what they're interacting with already. And it does that naturally. So if you do that, if you just say like, hey, follow the attention, build an algorithm that does that, and then just don't pay attention to what's actually happening as a result of that, you get the problems that we have now associated with social media. And I'd say we already knew statistics could be manipulated, but now with AI, like you can literally manipulate the things that we used to think of as direct observations almost, right? So it is important. Okay, so why are we special? So another thing I think at the core, and this is getting kind of far out there, but it's the heart of the scientific method, right? This is again on the topic of like why I think scientists need to be out there talking about this stuff. The scientific method, right? The fact that fundamentally we test and seek whether our viewpoint or our conclusions or anything that we're claiming is true, we test to see whether it's correct by comparing it to observations or data. We work out its implications to see whether correct, and perhaps most importantly, at least as scientists, we revise our viewpoint when faced with evidence that it's not correct, right? This is like what has to be done and what's not being done, if you ask me. All right, so what can we do? I'm long on being able to paint the picture of what it would be great if people were doing, but short on how do we do this? So that's where I'd love to have ideas. But generally, I think we need to educate people about what's happening and how bad it is, right? It's really taking over the economy of the United States and eventually the world. Call out the manipulation whenever we see it and focus on the method by which we know this is manipulation, right? Like not just, oh, I know these algorithms are bad, which is kind of what's happening now, but more specifically, why is it that you're being shown this thing that's not very directly related to reality? So just to paint this picture, what if everyone automatically recognized like niche rage bait in their Facebook, well, not Facebook, I should stop saying that, but Instagram or TikTok feeds, for example? Like what if people, immediately had this ability to say like, look, this thing is just showing me content that I interact with because I'm afraid of this thing, but in reality, it's a low probability event. That's still my example. What if people understood like how this like lack of context is used, right? And you can just look at I don't necessarily recommend doing this because it's depressing, but if you just look at the list of subjects of bills that Congress has passed recently, like it's all these little tiny niche things that have nothing to do with any of the problems that are actually facing people, right? It's just things that people get upset about or things that they can, get passed, right? For every post and headline, you can ask whether it matters or reverse the process and say like, what's actually important to people, right? And polling suggests that the economy and affordability crisis are the thing that's really important to people. Why aren't most of our headlines about that, right? And I think we know the answer, and not everybody does necessarily. And also, what about niche health scares and things like that? So there's a lot of places where attention is being focused on some tiny little issue where people can gain traction, but it's not really the most important thing. And it also often represents something that's not terribly consistent with reality. So how do we do this? I think we have to approach the separation between technical and non-technical aspects of this with a lot of respect for people and call out the manipulation whenever we see it, and focus on the method by which we know it's manipulation. But beyond that, I'm looking for anyone else's thoughts on this. So for discussion, I would love to ask if people have good examples of things that are working well. Like, who's your favorite influencer that addresses like the sort of anti-science crisis and things like that, and by which I'm asking, like, addresses the fact that inside of the bubble of people who already think the same way, we sort of know what our arguments are, but who addresses the interface between that bubble and the rest of the world? And what do you think is not working? And where do you disagree with me? Would love to hear it. So thanks. Would love to hear thoughts.
I've heard a couple of suggestions on responses. If you repeat the question,
Go, please. So my social media poison of choice is YouTube. Whenever I try not to do brain rot, like from Facebook, I don't even do Facebook anymore. That's like ultra brain rot. And Instagram, when I want to just turn my brain off, usually I go to YouTube, and there's a lot of like informational stuff, like things that actually are anti-brain rot a little bit. And YouTubers like to promote this one platform called Ground News, essentially, where it's like it tells you the news, but it also tells you the sources, like how many people who are most likely on the left or the right consume this type of news, and give you like hey, this it kind of gives you like a banner saying like, hey, by the way, a lot of right-wing people who consume this kind of media, make sure that you check it, or vice versa and all that. And I think being on there, like it's pretty useful to be able to like parse through like where the manipulation may be coming from the left or the right. I find that really helpful for me. I almost wish that there is like a TikTok specifically for like learning and intellectuals, so that you can like have like short little bursts of like little quick learning sessions, kind of like that. But yeah, that's my idea. I work on it.
That's cool. You don't need me to repeat that, right?
That's
Yeah, it's funny. My son just showed me a YouTube from Veritasium or something like that. It's like, yeah, everyone knows it. Okay, I didn't know that. It was a very well done video, and it put things into context, and it advertised Ground News. So there you go. That's good. I guess what I would say is that's totally awesome. How do we get that to spread outward to people who don't already think like that? Nobody else knows either. Oh dear.
My question is about, so you talk a lot about like the algorithms, but the way that these algorithms serve people is through like phones and computers.
Yeah.
And the way that these interfaces themselves are constructed doesn't obstruct them from accessing this, like without having to think about it. Like you can just open your phone and within 0 seconds be on Instagram scrolling. But if you had actually being more mindfully approaching your phone interface to begin with, you might like think twice before doing that. But, yeah.
Have you seen anyone? Should I repeat that, Jeff? Or
No, I was from here.
okay, yeah. So, have you noticed anyone trying to implement that?
I think,
Okay, just personally trying. Yeah.
well, like I've been building apps.
Oh, all right. Yeah, great. That's great.
We need to move on to our next speaker, but Betsy will be around all day and evening event tonight, so let's thank Betsy one more time. All right, so our next speaker is, there we go. Joseph Ahern, my co-host, or really I'm his co-host for the podcast. He was the main inspiration for it and does all of our video and sound, and we're losing lights again, editor, which is great. So I will run back there and try and deal with the lights while I pass it to Joseph. Go ahead, Joseph, if you want to share your screen and get going. Oh, let me allow you to share your screen. Oh, okay. Lights are fixed. Oh, for crying out loud.
Oh, I think I need to do this. Let's
Or
do
do I
it
need to
that way.
we stop sharing? I didn't think so.
Is that sharing now?
Let me. Stop sharing. Oh, here we go. I know what I need to do. Need to drag. In the dark. There we go. All right, we can see your screen now.
Great.
Yeah, take it away, Joseph.
Thanks. I'm Joseph Ahern. I've been a data scientist for 3.5 years now. And today I'm going to talk about what's in our Astronomer's toolkit for data science, um, including technical skills as well as transferable skills that we have that are often called soft skills. And um, let's see. Okay. So, just a little bit about my trajectory at the beginning. Just starting from my grad school, I did University of Idaho PhD in physics. My dissertation was on gravitational interactions and resonances in ring and moon systems, and that was focused on our outer solar system. I have a couple of papers related to Saturn's rings and moons, since we had Cassini ending around the time that I was beginning my PhD. And then I did have a final paper related to the ring systems of Uranus and Neptune. And I had a heavy emphasis on simulations and modeling. And this was without using machine learning techniques. And that's something that, you know, one of the reasons I'm giving this talk is because I waited too long to learn ML, machine learning. And it was once I did learn it, it seemed a lot easier than I expected. And so I just wanted to share that, especially for students, that you can dedicate a weekend and get started, and you'll probably advance further than you think if you already have some of this technical foundations from astronomy. So in my last semester, I realized that I needed to have open doors to transition to an industry position, and I figured data science was what had the most overlap with my experience as a grad student. And so I joined a transition support group, started networking on LinkedIn, did a bunch of informational interviews with people. Mostly, started out with people who already knew me from my past, and like they were reaching out to me when they saw that I was in a job search. So that was really helpful. I learned how to switch from a curriculum vitae, a CV, to a functional resume that emphasized my skills as that I learned in astronomy, in physics, as um, as data science expertise, data analysis expertise that I was already forming, even though it wasn't like officially data science. It's still a lot of the technical skills were still very transferable. I did take some online courses from Andrew Ng's deep learning specialization on Coursera. I took some SQL courses because we didn't use that in grad school. Those were very quick and not too difficult to get the basics of. And then the book Ace the Data Science Interview also helped a lot. And then in the week that I graduated, I was able to get three different offers. One of them being a data scientist offer. Another was a consulting consultant role, and third was one of the postdocs that I had applied to like 6 months earlier. Um, I took the data scientist position at PACCAR. This is in the Seattle area and where I was already living. And back then it was 2 days a week in the office, 3 days from home, and then it slowly ramped up to being all 5 days a week in the office now. But more on that in a bit. In my role, we've been working on machine learning projects that are being used in production, others that are still in development, and I can't talk directly about what I'm working on, but it's mostly been basic machine learning, but with a lot of good best practices that I've been learning along the way. And there are a lot of soft skills that are becoming increasingly more important. And so that's another reason to talk about those. So, but first, just to paint the picture clearly, we have a myth versus reality situation. The myth that I believed when I started grad school was that machine learning is only for geniuses. And this was partially because in my undergrad, I did I had one friend in astronomy who was a senior undergrad and he did a machine learning project, some research that he presented at a AAS meeting, and like he was no I kind of knew him as the friend who would never sleep because he was spending all his time on his research and courses and I felt I had that idea just from that one experience, that anecdotal evidence that that's what was required to do ML, to like stay up all night doing it and not have time for, a work-life balance. And sure, he ended up getting into like every grad school he applied to, went to Harvard in the end. But but that's what made me think that machine learning was going to be hard. And for my first year in grad school, I had in mind, all right, I found this PDF online of machine learning with Python. It's like, okay, I downloaded it. I'm going to read that. But I kept feeling intimidated, kept putting it off. In my final semester, when I finally buckled down and learned it, I realized that it was actually easier than most of my astronomy research. Of course, there are, you know, niche applications, the frontiers of machine learning can be more advanced for sure. And I don't want to downplay machine learning, AI, but it's like the 80/20 rule. Like 80% of the benefits from machine learning that we can get are from the basics, the core machine learning. And that's what can be learned like more easily than a lot of astronomy research. So we already have a lot of technical skills for machine learning. When we're fitting our models to data, we might not be using any specific machine learning libraries, but maybe we're just doing least squares using linear algebra. But that's already doing, regression techniques that are used in machine learning. Sometimes there might just be more, a different approach to them from a machine learning library, like a tree-based one that's different from what we might have used in astronomy. But it's still pretty much the same technical skill that carries over when we're classifying sources or planets versus dwarf planets, whatever it is. Classification, that's another one of the big machine learning techniques. and we're already prepared for that. When we're identifying structure in simulations, for example, that can be clustering, which is another machine learning technique. When we have a lot of noisy data as astronomers, and we learn how to handle that, um, and account for the, different sources of the noise and so forth. And that also helps us with robust modeling that is used in ML, that we try to make our models not be overfit, um, but respond to reality. And so we already have a lot of these technical skills. So it's important to also think about the soft skills because this is where we can really stand out, um, after having made sure that our technical skills are in order and ones that are crucial for data science. And these are also ones that mostly you've started, we've all started to develop during grad school, maybe even before. And so, communication and storytelling being perhaps the most important one. Excuse me. Um, when we give talks at conferences, when we talk to our advisors or other people we're collaborating with, we need to be able to communicate, you know, technical aspects. Sometimes we're talking to non-technical audiences and knowing how to summarize our research. Like we don't want to always take 20 minutes to explain it. Sometimes we only have 2 minutes. And so we have to be able to explain, excuse me. All right, so hopefully this cough drop will help with my dry throat here. Um, business acumen, that's another one that maybe we didn't focus on in grad school at all, but is important once we're in industry for going forward in our data science roles and knowing really what will drive the business, what the business stakeholders are really interested in. And a lot of times that's that ROI, return on investment. Um, and so related to that is critical thinking and problem framing. When we set up a quantitative problem, perhaps with machine learning, we need to frame it in the way that the way we solve the problem is actually addressing the business need. And so, um, these are the rest are other soft skills, that are important to be taking into account as we move forward. So, adaptability, continuous learning, collaboration and empathy, ethics and data intuition. These are all things that maybe we aren't focused on at the beginning because we want to make sure we have all the technical skills, but it doesn't take long for those technical skills because to um, to transfer over if we already have that astronomy background. So these soft skills are ones to really be taking into account to advance in our careers. Um, and they will be helpful really in pretty much any job that you might have, as a data scientist or something related to that. These will all be helpful. So for astronomers moving into data scientists, those who don't have an official data scientist role at this point, it's I would recommend starting just basics. You don't have to, you can ignore all the more advanced stuff at the beginning. Start with Python using the pandas and scikit-learn libraries. With just those, you can practice doing some machine learning models. I recommend practicing on real data sets, ones that you download from online. They can be helpful as like a first project, but everybody has done Titanic dataset, Iris dataset, machine learning. So that won't make you stand out. Sure, go ahead and use it to explore if you haven't built a model before. Um, but then to make you stand out, you'll want to practice on some real data set, handle the noisy, messy data, and that's what will help the most. Um, Now, in the past few years, this is now an option. We can use an LLM, such as ChatGPT or Gemini, to customize our learning plan. Um, and that can help you start from where you're at and then advance to the next level, breaking it down one step at a time. And this is used not as a shortcut, but as a tutor. And we can also include soft skills as part of our learning plan. And that way we don't ignore them and they will also help us to stand out. Um, so just as an example of practicing on real data, after I was already hired, I've been practicing my machine learning techniques with my own commuting data, how long it takes me to commute um, to the job. On the left is going to work, on the right is coming home. And the point isn't to, present my commuting project, but just to give an example, you can see the big bumps for rush hour. Um, but this has also enabled me to practice with data visualization. The last thing I did most recently was figuring out how to split the axes so that it wasn't like all the data clumped at the bottom due to a couple of outlier trips um, that end up taking up to almost 3 hours. Um, Also been able to practice Python programming, writing better code using um, different best practices in that, as well as ML ops or ML operations. And so I I've worked on um, other projects too, besides this one that have been just for practice. But this is an example, like um, using some real data. It doesn't have to be your own data, but it should mean something to you so that you care about your project, and you can build your different intuitions from this and improve your skills that way. So then for those who are already in data roles, that's when the emphasis goes even more towards our soft skills, communicating our insights to non-technical stakeholders, for example, when we want to work pose, instead of just taking a project that's been assigned to us, to actually be looking at the business, knowing the data that we have available and what we could potentially do with that in order to scope high impact solvable problems. Sometimes the business stakeholders, they don't even know what problems they can solve with the data that they have. Other times they might think that the the data is there, but it's really messy, and so it's hard to do anything with it. And you have to convince them to make sure the data quality improves so that machine learning solutions that come out of it will be better and can be trusted more. Um, and to convince uh, maybe non-technical stakeholders that AI is not magic. It can't, you know, it's it's going to take the data that has been stored from the company and um, if that data is not reliable, then the solutions will not be reliable either. So, um, yeah, that's an important skill to learn how to be able to communicate that. Um, and then as we grow in our roles, we'll be leading projects, not just doing supporting roles, and we'll be mentoring others. Those will also help us develop. And then also to exercise technical judgment under uncertainty. So these are just examples of different things that those of us who are already in data roles can take into account as we try to advance in our soft skills and in our careers. So just a practical roadmap kind of for anybody. Um, as we develop our plans each year, we want to include both technical skills and soft skills in our development plans. And yes, work on projects where we get to try new techniques with modeling and iterate over them. Maybe that's, in physics and astronomy, we learn back of the envelope calculations, and then later on, take more time to solve it more precisely. And that's how we do a lot of machine learning as well. You just set up an easy pipeline, use XGBoost, um, get some solution, and then later on, compare that to like GBM or other techniques and see what actually works best. But we can be building intuition as we do this, and we don't need to build encyclopedic knowledge because you can look anything up online. Um, and then also just to include some soft skills as well that we can be working on as we go forward. Um, so just final, well, there's one more slide after this um, that I'll put up during time for questions, but this is the last content slide. You're already prepared with your technical knowledge, and so it's important to trust that foundation that you've built as an astronomer. Don't be afraid of the buzzwords. Nobody is able to keep up with all of, you know, AI frontier research. And you don't have to become a machine learning theorist, even though we've been academics. We don't have to be publishing papers on AI and ML as we go forward in data science roles. And so our quantitative background helps us to perform our roles, but also we can grow and continue growing by how we apply our skills, not just from which models we use. So with that, I will close. Uh, if there are any questions, you can ask them. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. This is probably the easiest email to jot down. If you have my Gmail, that works too. I recently wrote a blog post somewhat that this talk kind of is an extrapolation from. So it's related to this. You can find it here. If think ML is too hard, STEM students are already halfway there. And then also just another plug to tune into our Astronomers Turned Data Scientist podcast. So thanks.
Joseph, can you hear me asking you questions right now?
Yeah, it's not too loud, but I can still hear you.
Okay, that's always our perennial issue, but if there's questions in the crowd? Yeah.
All right, I came in here a little bit late, so I apologize if you already talked about this at the beginning, but what does machine learning look like in a data science role?
So, feel like it's pretty broad question. So in a data science role, I would say that in general, we will, take real data, build a model. We're just, doing it on our own computer at the time and making sure that the model runs. Um, and then once once we have a model, then the other part of it is to like build um, a way that the model can be interfaced with. So an API usually, and that is how an individual query can be sent to the model in order for it to spit back a result. And like that's what maybe we have less experience of um, with as researchers in academia, but that that can be learned. And um, another thing about the models we maintain is that we want to retrain them every periodically. One of the ones that I maintain a retrain it automatically gets retrained every month, but and then I have to like make sure the results still look good and then put it into production, replacing the one that was previously in production. So there's some maintenance that goes on, like making sure that it's still giving good results. We have dashboards that are built with Tableau that we look at um, to make sure that everything is still reasonable. And so there's a lot of extra work that is done that's built kind of around the model, the machine learning model. So, and that's often called continuous integration, continuous development, CI/CD, and that's one of those ML operations that is taken into account in our roles. So with with other people's data science jobs, I'm sure there are plenty of differences, but I hope this gives some insight.
All right, we're gonna end there with Joseph. I know we had a question in the chat, but we can answer that later. And yeah, if you're online, please put questions in the chat. And if you're in here, speakers will be online. Also, I know Joseph shared his contact info. We'll put on the website already is the contact info LinkedIn page for every one of our speakers, so you can reach out to them through that. And we'll also, like I said, have the recordings posted. So right now we're on break until I think 25 after. So let's thank Joseph one more time.